Hi, my name is Mark Honeyman. Welcome to Valley View Retreat, our wonderful home here in the Sierra de las Nieves mountains in southern Spain. This is part two of a series of monologues, it appears, about living off-grid, and what that means, how you would go about it, and some of the trials and tribulations. The last time we spoke about how important establishing what your overhead will be in making your plans, and doing some sort of an inventory in what you can live without and what you definitely can't live without, in order to try and focus us on the area that we should be looking at and what you would need to have in place depending on our own specific set of circumstances. We also talked about the fact that in modern day, being absolutely self-sufficient is quite difficult, in that we need to generate, for the vast majority of us, a certain level of income, a certain level of cash income that's necessary to pay taxes and to ensure that if something goes wrong, that we do not become instantly destitute. In today's talk, we're going to sort of expand on that, take things a bit further, and talk as honestly as I can about our situation and the situation of a lot of people that we know. So the first thing is the last thing that we talked about the last time, and it's the big lie. So what is the big lie? We're living in a world where, despite what some rather large world leaders would have us believe, and when I say large, I mean that in many ways, we're suffering from climate change, very significant climate change that's been brought about as a result of our activities. We have contributed to an increase in global temperatures that's continuing and that's accelerating. And there are lots of organizations, international organizations and governments or whatever, that would have you believe that we're coping with that we're dealing with it. And at the same time, the targets that they're actually setting are plus targets, they're positive targets. We will prevent the climate from changing by 1.5 degrees over the next so many years. That's a change, it's still a change. That change significantly impacts on people in certain parts of the world to a much greater extent than in others, and can literally be the difference between famine, between deforestation, desertification. It's not going backwards, it's not making things better. It's not even keeping things the same. So given how dire the consequences of this are, you would think that there'd be a huge motivation to make significant changes, to look after and encourage people to be less wasteful, to use less fossil fuels, to do less travel. But the reality is that these are all things that create income. And when you create income, then you create a method for collecting taxes. And when you create a method for collecting taxes, then you're creating an economic environment that allows things to progress. And we have to accept the fact that there's a certain level of infrastructure that we all need in order to survive and to function. And that has to be paid for somehow. And it has to be paid for through taxes. And we're left in a situation where lip service is paid to conservation issues, to eco-friendliness, to becoming more self-reliant and self-sufficient. But the reality is that it's not in a government's interest for you to earn less so that you can pay less taxes. It's not in the government's interest for you to remove yourself from a system which is designed to pull you ever deeper into debt, which is designed to keep you controllable and to keep you monitorable, to keep you in places where they can actually see what you're doing. So right now, globally, particularly as a result of the pandemic, we're seeing this massive push to become a cashless society. Now, the only reason for a cashless society is so that they can keep track of every single penny that you have and every single penny that you spend in order that they get their cut. There's no other reason for it. They will tell you that it has to do with terrorism and it has to do with organised crime. The reality is that terrorists in particular are fanatics. And fanatics will always find a way to circumvent whatever the rules and regulations are. And organised crime is exactly the same. We've been trying to do away with organised crime since organised crime actually started. And we failed miserably. And the reason we failed miserably is it's so lucrative. It's so lucrative that no matter what the rules and regulations are that you bring in, these people will find ways of circumventing it. Not only that, but because they're finding more unique ways of circumventing it, it's becoming more and more and more difficult to actually find them. The systems that we're introducing, far from doing away with organised crime, are making organised crime so sophisticated that it becomes near impossible to control it. It's a ridiculous system. A system that's self-propagating. You keep making things more complicated in order to make things more complicated. It's ludicrous. And the big lie is the fact that that somebody somewhere is saying, that's fantastic what you're doing. You're not pulling from the environment. You're not pulling from society. You're not being a drain on it. You're being self-sufficient. No one is saying that. Or rather, people are saying that, but no one is supporting it. They're making your life more and more and more difficult. When I bought this land originally, it was possible to build 400 and something square meters on it. By the time I got the money to actually build on it, the law had changed so that I couldn't build at all on it. Now, when I bought the land, I paid development prices for it and paid the taxes on that. They changed the law. Did they give me back the tax? No. Did they pay me the difference between land that's only for goat grazing and land that I could build on? No. They changed the law in the blinking of an eye and left me with my entire life savings, left me and my wife with our entire life savings locked up in a piece of land that told us we couldn't do anything with. If that's not criminal, I don't know what is. If a company did that, you'd take them to court. But countries can do that, whatever. And when they did that, were they supporting people becoming more self-sufficient, more eco-friendly? No, they weren't. No, they were trying to force people into towns, into cities, where they can monitor and tax them to the hilt. That's what they're trying to do. We have here in Spain and in most of Europe a thing called private property. So you buy your property and that's yours. Except it's not yours because every year you're required to pay some sort of tax on it. And more importantly, it's your property, but you can't actually do anything with it without getting somebody else's permission. So it can be anything from your neighbours don't like where your house is, the way your house is facing, the number of windows in it, the design of your house. Or it can be local rules and regulations about how much land you actually need to build. Or local rules and regulations that tell you that you can only build something which is conventional, which is completely environmentally unfriendly, because that's the only thing that looks nice in this particular environment. Where is the rules and regulations? Where have they changed to actually make us move more towards being environmentally friendly? They would rather spend millions of pounds injecting chemicals into the cavity walls that 20 years ago they told us were wonderful for the environment, and now fill them full of chemical foam in order to make that house more environmentally at a cost that is so great that you could actually build a small environmentally friendly home for it if you did it with something like straw bale. It's ludicrous, absolutely ludicrous. Lip service is the only thing that's been paid. They're not supporting you. They're making your life more and more and more difficult. And eventually we'll reach a stage where it will be near impossible to be off-grid or even sustainable, to have some sort of sustainable lifestyle, because there's no future in it. They changed the law at the blinking of an eye without any consultation. And total disregard for the effect that actually has on people who have invested their life savings and their life skills in making a life that's simplified and that requires less input from them, less outside influence and input. Opening a bank account when you don't have a physical address is impossible. Opening a bank account when you don't have a utility bill is impossible. In fact, if you don't have a utility bill, doing lots of things is impossible. They're saying that we should be relying more on solar and more on wind. But when they say that, they don't mean your personal solar and wind. They mean they want to use solar and wind to generate electricity in the grid. And then they can tax you on that and charge you whatever it is they want to charge you. But if you do it yourself and you don't have that utility bill, they make your life a living hell. Impossible to get the documentation that you actually need. If you don't have a proper physical address here in Spain, you can't actually get what they call on the empadronamiento, the local register. And if you're not on the local register, you cannot even buy a car. The system is designed specifically to keep you in a little box in a town somewhere where they can monitor the amount of money you make, the amount of money you spend, and what you do. They're not trying to make the environment better at the expense of their tax revenue. So coupled with all of that, you have the media. Now, we tend to say the media as if that's one thing, and it's not. Nowadays, it's lots of things, everything from your neighbour's blog to the Facebook page, to the actual national news, to the local news, to local free newspapers, to online stuff. Media, what does that mean? The issue is that the media nowadays is not actual media, it's somebody's opinion. They're not reporting on important things. They're picking and choosing what it is that they report on. And the people, what the hell would you expect? People have their own hobby horses. And when things cease to be completely independent, they start to shift in one direction or in another direction. So, we've got a great feel-good programming thing where everybody's gone on about all the amazing things. We're recycling. And if you don't recycle, you get fined. And you've got all of these bins that you put all your various plastics and bits and pieces in, and that's saving the environment. And then it turns out that all of the plastic stuff is all baled and it's put on a ship. And then it's used massive amount of diesel to actually shift that the whole way across from the UK to Turkey. And then it's offloaded in Turkey, and where it's supposed to actually be recycled and sorted, it's taken off somewhere to a piece of spare waste ground, and then it's set on fire. So the packaging from the stuff that you actually bought in Sainsbury's ends up on a deserted beach somewhere in Turkey, creating plumes of black noxious fumes and smoke. And you paid for the packaging that the product came in. You paid for the wheelie bin that you put the package in. You spent your time sorting the stuff out. You put it in the wheelie bin hoping it was the right one and that you wouldn't get fined by the local council. You paid the local council to take it and recycle it. And they put it on a huge diesel guzzling ship. Brought it through the oceans where anything could happen. It could capsize. It could spring a leak and pollute the oceans. The whole way to Turkey, where it was then taken off, used more diesel to punt it wherever it goes, and then set alight and burned on a beach or a piece of waste ground. But that's their commitment to making the environment better. That's what we're dealing with. That's what you're dealing with. Lip service. That's what we're dealing with, lip service. And it doesn't get better until enough people actually come together to force them to make it better. And then we get back to the media thing. The thing about media is that it can be influenced and pushed in certain directions. And now, because we don't have a single media, we don't all listen to the radio, we don't all look at the 6 o'clock news on the TV, we don't all read the daily newspaper, we're all looking at different news. And each of those has its own hobby horse and is pushing in a different direction. And because of that, there's no harmony in our response to anything. We're pulled off on little side turns so that 5% of us are here and 2% of us are pushing for that and 5% of us are pushing for that and 30% of us are pushing for something else. And there is no harmony. And because there's no harmony, we never get enough momentum, enough impetus to actually make the changes that are necessary. The great free press and free media has actually created a situation where we can't keep our act together for longer than a couple of minutes without getting sidetracked on something else. So here's another one of the big lies, that if enough of us get together, we can make change. Not that that's not true. It's the getting enough of us together, actually moving in the same direction. That's become virtually impossible. And big corporations and governments have actually figured this out. They love it. They love us all pulling in different directions, shouting about different things, but not enough of us to actually make a significant difference. It works. They just carry on doing what it is they're doing. But until enough of us come together and say, you know, if I'm buying private land, it's my land. It's my land. And yes, there should be a certain number of rules. I can't build my house looking into somebody else's house. Yes, I agree. That seems reasonable. People have a expectation of a certain amount of privacy. That's true. But what I choose to build, that shouldn't be anybody's business. What I choose to build it out of, that shouldn't be anybody's business. The fact that I don't have a utility bill should be something that's lauded and applauded, not something that makes me a pariah, that makes me like a criminal when I go to open a bank account or to pay taxes or something. That's ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. These are things that we need to be coming together and pushing for. But will we? No, because it's like diet, isn't it? We got some people who believe that if you don't eat meat, you can't be healthy. Other people that believe that if you do eat meat, you can't be healthy. And other people that believe that it's not just enough that you don't eat meat, but you can't eat eggs and you can't eat this and you can't eat that. Everybody has an opinion, and because everybody has an opinion, and because each of the opinions are slightly different, we're not all coming together to do anything. And that's terrible. That is terrible, because there are some fundamental things that really do need to change, that are in most people's interest to change. A cashless society, that's outrageous for people like us. What do you do when you take your produce to the market? Well, you're going to have to take card payments for something that costs €3 and then pay on top of that. You know, I have a bank account here that I use to pay I have to have a bank account in order to pay my social security and pay my taxes and pay my value-added tax. When I don't earn enough, when I don't earn €700 a month, the bank hits me with bank charges on a monthly basis that amount to about €80 every 2 months. €80 every 2 months. They hit me with those bank charges because I got poorer, because my income fell. So to add insult to injury during the winter when it's very difficult for us to actually do any business, not only are we not making money, but the bank is actually stealing money from us because we're not making money. Stuff like that needs to change. I don't want to use the bank. I want to pay for everything in cash, but I can't. So I'm forced to use the bank even though I don't want to. And then I'm charged because I'm not putting enough money into the bank, or I'm charged for using my money to do something. That needs to change. We need to have some sort of a better system that does not penalise people for being poor, or penalise people for being frugal, or penalise people for trying to be somewhat self-sufficient, self-reliant, who are not sponging off the state. Why would you punish people for trying to actually make the world a better place? Makes no sense to me. More and more frequently within our own community, I'm hearing people say, you know, if you're not doing this, you're not really being sustainable. If you're not doing this, you're not really being eco-friendly. If you're not doing this, if you're not following permaculture, well then what's the point? I've been an educator all of my life, and for many years I lectured on the master's degree in sports medicine in Trinity College in Dublin. And one of the questions that were asked over and over and over again is, you know, what level of activity do people need to be following in order for them to derive the greatest health benefits? Do you need to be running 100 miles a week or 10 miles a week, or 2 sets of 15 minutes of weights training 3 times a week? And there are very few studies that have actually looked long term at what the impact of various lifestyle changes make on the overall health of an individual. One of them is a Harvard longitudinal study, which I don't know how long it's been running now. I mean, in my day, it had been running for over 40 years. And it gave them a huge amount of data from a lot of different people. And what we discovered, absolutely what they discovered, and what I merely dragged up and spouted out at lectures, was that the greatest health impact is when you go from doing nothing to doing something. Nothing that you do after that has as big an impact, positive impact on your health, as from going from nothing to doing anything. And in terms of the environment and climate change, the same thing is true. Anybody who steps out of using their car every day to go to work, burning coal, using energy without thinking about it, using water without thinking about it, shopping for things that come from halfway across the world, buying new things when there's something else that can be changed to suit whatever the purpose is that you want. Those are the things that make the biggest impact. Not those tiny little, if you're not doing totally reliant on permaculture, then you're not really being environmental. No. The things that make the biggest changes are the things that have made the biggest negative impact. So the use of fossil fuels, travelling all over the world at the drop of a hat, buying stuff that comes from thousands and thousands of miles away. Those are the things that have the biggest impact on our environment. And changing those things will have the biggest positive impact. The other things are nice and they're your hobby horses. And maybe, at some stage in the future, we'll be in the wonderful position where those things will make the next big change. But right now, that's not the big change. Awareness is the big change. Going from being unaware to aware is what will make the biggest change. So please, if you're within our community, stop telling people all the things that they should do and start applauding them for the things that they've already done. The fact that they're part of the community means that they're making positive contributions. That's the thing that we really should be focusing on. I'd love to think that our community, our off-grid, self-sufficient community, would be in harmony or somewhat homogenous. But I look at the Facebook pages that I'm a part of, and everybody's an expert, everybody's got a different opinion, and everybody's got a hobby horse. Even within our community, we can't seem to pull together. We can't seem to get over the differences between us. Some people want to be completely self-sufficient and live completely self-sufficient vegan lifestyles, and if you're not doing the same, well, you're not worth talking to. Some people believe that their idea of a composting toilet is the only idea that will actually work, despite the fact that people have lived on this earth for God knows how long. And you know what? The vast majority of them haven't died because their composting toilet wasn't made this way, it was made that way. It didn't happen. Everybody thinks they're an expert, everybody's looking for opinions, and what they're getting is so many different things. Half of them from people who don't actually live the lifestyle, they just have an opinion. And half of them from people who are fanatical about their particular type of lifestyle. We need to actually be pulled together so that no matter what the choices are that we make, that those choices are okay, that they're supported, and that it allows us to live. As long as we're not interfering with other people, as long as we're not creating any harm, we really shouldn't have to be worrying about our own community ripping us apart. There's enough rules and regulations, enough government and local government and neighbours interference without that. Don't need it. So they're the big lies and my rant. And I don't know whether next week I'll have another rant or whether I'll do something more practical. I'll have a think about that.